All right. Thank you all for being here today on February 10th. It is 5:47-ish, and I don't believe we have a quorum for tonight. So
Does that mean we can't do the,
we can't vote on minutes, we can't vote on things,
Okay.
pretty much. I believe this has been the protocol for the last 4 months, I think. Which is
I know, yeah,
very sad thing, actually.
terrible.
It is.
So I can only encourage you to tell the other land use committee members, where the heck are you?
Yeah,
I was told by Elaine and Freeman ahead of time that they could not come. Everyone else, I don't have any reason why they're here, why they're not here. Bill Napower did call me this morning and say that he was sick, and so he couldn't come. I felt that was fine. I doubt anyone wants the coronavirus or anything.
oh, thanks.
Well, I will not be here next month, so
All right. I'll make sure to keep a note of that, and,
I
be
think Barbara's
out of the
coming. I
country,
mentioned to her the
so.
other day.
all right. Well, we'll at least move on to what we're gonna be talking about tonight, and when she does come here, we could consider at least some of the past minutes. Apparently, we have minutes going back to November that haven't been
Yeah.
approved,
Yep,
so that's very sad. But tonight, we are talking about Articles 1 through 5, or the reformatted Articles 1 through 5. Article 1 is the general, Article 2 is administration, Article 3 is the application review process, Article 4 is non-conforming sections, and Article 5 is the appeal process. We'll go through each one from 1 through 5. With the exception of 3, all 5 articles are mostly copy and paste from what our current land use ordinance is. So tonight,
Yeah.
we're more just reading through and seeing if we want to change any language to just make it more clear to understand. Or if there's some provision we want to add in that you think is missing from our current ordinance. Yeah. Sarah, were you
So
gonna-
we're just looking at grammar, we're not looking at what the intent of the
of the-
language is,
Um,
and if we agree or disagree or anything.
We can, if there's something that you don't think makes sense, or there's something that should be added, you can certainly propose that, and I'll just keep a note of it.
Okay.
And then Article 3, I want to say, I either want to do Article 3 first, since it's one of the more newer ones we're going to deal with, or last, so that we can just read through the other 4 articles and just do it the grammar. I leave that up to you 4, which one you want to do, whether it's Article 3 first or last.
does it make sense to, do
Just,
we need to know 1 and 2 in order to understand number 3, or is it a completely different?
No, so Article 1 is just the land use ordinance in general. It's just this document exists.
Yep,
It's supposed to do that. Article 2 is just talking about the planning board, the code enforcement officer, the roles of the administration. Article 3 is when someone comes in with an application, who do they go to, and what's their process for getting
yeah.
approved?
Has that changed since last year? Wasn't
So-
this, the people were talking about this quite a bit.
So this is, right now, we have Article 6, which is site plan and subdivision review. What we want to do is separate the two, so that subdivision's its own article, which we discussed last meeting.
Yeah.
And then one for site plan, so that people know whether to go to the code enforcement officer, the town planner, or the planning board, and what they'll need for those 3
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
things.
would it be fair to say you want to clarify the process?
For,
I mean, just
right,
someone
Yeah.
sitting down and reading this
yes, that's what Article 3 is for.
Yeah.
to clear the fog.
Right. If someone is looking online and they say, I want to get this business or I want to build this thing, who do I go to? They'll look at the application review article and hopefully they'll make some sense of it. And then in the future, we'll have Article 7, which is going to incorporate the land use matrix that we've
Yep.
talked about in the past. So, if there's no other questions, we'll go with Article 3.
I just have a comment.
Mm-hmm.
May not be relevant, but since that, Article 3 is on the application review,
Yes.
I'm the only planning board member here.
You're worried that,
I'm wondering if we should wait until there's at
Another-
least another planning board member here? Does that matter?
we can certainly do that if
I mean, I don't-
everyone feels that way.
Well, we
Well-
haven't read it, I haven't read it through yet,
Well,
other
and,
than. no
well, I
one's
mean,
supposed
at
to
least
know.
for Article 5, Sanford's the only one who's on the Board of Appeals.
Right.
So, I don't know if you feel the same way on that.
I'm sorry, I was thinking about something.
I was just wondering if, like, going through the application review process, the application review section is especially pertinent to the needs of the planning board. Probably ditto for the appeals board. And I was wondering if it was prudent for us, since we're such a small group, and I'm the only planning board member here, to read this, and you for the appeals board or whatever. I mean, does it need more ears?
No, I think as long as we have someone from the boards here just to say, this sounds fine, this doesn't sound fine, can you consider this? That's, as long as you're here for the planning board, it would be helpful if Barbara does come a bit later, just to give her 2 cents as well, but,
Okay.
You could also make a note, I would think, and if
Then I
something
can-
stops you and say,
Yeah.
whoops,
yeah.
and then discuss it, bring that up at the beginning of the next meeting.
I mean, this is primarily relating to the planning board, it seems to me, just looking through here. Right?
Right, because the code enforcement officer and town planner, it's very simple process. There's not much of a public hearing or,
I mean, you know, the
Procedure.
Board of Appeals only comes into play if the code enforcement turns down an application.
well, there's Article 5 for the Board of Appeals
Okay,
process.
yeah. Which is not Article 3. Right? So,
That's correct. 3 is different from 5.
no, so I'm just saying, I was just skimming through the Article 3 and I didn't see much of anything relating to the Board of Appeals, so.
Well, so, at least for the application review, we can just start that.
Yeah.
Because, as Sanford was just saying, a good chunk of the beginning is at least code enforcement officer, town planner stuff, doesn't really get to the planning board for a few paragraphs at least. So we can at least just start seeing it, and once it sounds like the planning, you think we should wait for Barbara, we can just make a note at that point.
Okay.
Right? So, as I say, I'll just read it, and if something doesn't make sense, feel free to just say, that, can you make this correction? So 3.1, purpose. The purpose of this section is to provide a level of review that is proportionate to the anticipated impact of a proposed land use activity upon the town. The level of review is determined by the potential impact of the proposed land use activity upon a land use district, its land features, its existing and anticipated development density, and how it can exist harmoniously with the dominant environmental and man-made features of area it will occupy. 3.2, types of application review. Activities, uses, structures which require review as indicated on the land use table shall be reviewed by one of the following: code enforcement officer, town planner, and code enforcement officer, and planning board.
I would suggest,
Yeah, I realized that as I was saying it. Go ahead.
I would just suggest substituting the word "or"
Yeah.
for "and" in front of planning board,
Yeah.
Or planning board.
because it's, 3 options.
Right. Okay.
And what I might also suggest, where it's the town planner and code enforcement officer, I say jointly by,
Yeah,
Code enforcement officer,
comma, jointly by town planner and code enforcement officer.
Jointly by town planner and code enforcement
Yeah,
officer.
so they understand that that's two
Right.
boards they have to go to.
So reviewed by one of the following: code enforcement officer, jointly by town planner and code enforcement officer, or planning board. All right?
Yeah.
3.2.1, code enforcement officer review. Within 10 days of receiving an application, the code enforcement officer shall determine if the application is complete and notify the applicant in writing that the application is complete, or if incomplete, the specific material needed to make the application complete. The applicant shall be responsible for providing the additional material to the code enforcement officer. The code enforcement officer may conduct a site visit of the proposed activity. Within 10 days of determining that the application is complete, the code enforcement officer shall make a final decision on the application. I'm going to quickly capitalize the O for the last officer.
And will they then notify them in writing again that that they've made their decision?
Substantively, should there be a time limit on the amount, on completing an incomplete application? I mean, so it doesn't hang out there forever?
Within 10 days of receiving an application, code shall determine if the application is complete.
Or if incomplete, the specific material needed, you know, you got a 10-day requirement for review of the application. And
Right.
if it's incomplete,
The code enforcement officer gives it back to the
it
applicant.
says, this is what you need.
Right.
At that point, it hasn't been deemed as filed, or, I mean, I'm just, you know,
Well, with the code enforcement officer, it's been different with how the planning board does it, because with the code enforcement officer, Stan is just in the back room over there. People could just
right, yeah.
approach him at any time. Whereas with the planning board, it is waiting an entire month until the planning board's ready, when a
Well,
lot does change.
But, you know, so someone comes in and there's a building lot and they want to build a house.
Right,
And there are things that are required to be provided to the code enforcement officer.
right,
And he's got 10 days to review it and let the applicant know if there's anything missing.
right.
Is there any need to impose a time limitation on the applicant to provide the additional material?
No.
No? I mean, would it be a good idea? I mean, do you want to have applications incomplete, pending?
Well, there's not much of a difference if Stan says no and the person just decides not to do it. I mean, that sometimes happens too. Someone comes in, says, I want to do
Right,
this.
okay. I mean, I'm
But
just,
I get what you mean.
So like if they didn't return it within a certain amount of time, they have to reapply,
Yeah,
right? Is that
Right.
what you're getting at?
right, if they don't, they, you have 60 days to provide the additional information.
Right.
If not, if upon failing that, the application's deemed denied,
yeah, otherwise that thing could be hanging out there forever.
Okay.
something like that.
You know, people might, if an
Does that
applicant gets annoyed,
happen?
doesn't do it right away, it's kind of a
Okay.
problem.
You want to put that in the applicant's court.
Also,
Yeah.
Max, will the code enforcement officer advise the applicant of their decision in writing? Because it just says within 10 days of determining, the code enforcement officer shall make a final decision on the application.
Stan has always done that, but we can include that as well. Code enforcement officer shall make a final decision on the application and provide notice to applicant in writing.
I mean, that's covered,
Yeah.
once it's complete, but,
So I have three, but, so the two main changes, Sanford is saying there should be a time limit for the applicant to complete their
well, I'm just
application.
thinking that might be a good idea.
Is it
Yeah.
usually a problem?
No, as I say, usually they're these big grand scale projects. Usually someone just comes in, says, here's my site plan review to put for Charlotte Davenhill, it was doing the restaurant in the downtown or the cafe, I should say, with the downtown. But someone else might have another project, like a cottage industry, that they come in, say, I want to do this, and we just never see them again.
One other thing,
But they haven't actually applied.
No, they give the form, and we say, we need a lot more than this, and they just never come back.
Oh, okay, so, but they never completed the application?
Right.
Yeah.
But we can put in that time limit thing, if that
Yeah.
Yeah.
is something you just wanna have in writing.
Yeah, I'm thinking, 30 days or 60 days or something like that.
Okay.
The other thing is just, I was looking at 10 days and looking below at 12 days. Are days defined someplace else in this ordinance?
Do you want any difference between calendar days and business days?
Yeah,
Okay.
that was my point.
Yeah, we can make that,
I mean, 10 days, 10 business days would basically be 2 weeks.
right.
And, 12 business days would be slightly less than 3 weeks.
Mhm.
But, I mean, I mean, you could just put in business days everywhere, or you could define that someplace, one or the other.
I'll have to make that as a note for the top, just because days is all throughout,
Yeah.
so. Define business calendar days. I think for this, it's mostly been calendar days.
Okay, well, yeah.
Just because at least when we get to the notifications, the business days gets a bit more tricky, especially with the 7 days
Yep.
for.
Yeah, I mean,
How many
calendars, yeah.
holidays too?
But,
Yeah.
I mean, one way or the other, it ought to be
Right,
Yeah.
specified.
all right, so next to 3.2.2, town planner / code enforcement officer review. Within 12 days of receiving an application, the town planner and the code enforcement officer shall determine if the application is complete and notify the applicant in writing that the application is complete. Or, if incomplete, the specific material needed to make the application complete. The applicant shall be responsible for providing the additional material to make the application complete. The town planner and code enforcement officer shall conduct a site visit of the proposed activity. Within 12 days of determining that the application is complete, the town planner and code enforcement officer shall make a final decision on the application. The town planner and the code enforcement officer, after reviewing an application for completeness, may, at their discretion, decide to have the application submitted to the planning board for review if they find that the application would benefit from a public hearing and review by the planning board. They shall notify the applicant and the planning board of their decision and initiate the planning board review process.
Okay, couple things.
Yep, I figured. I figured that I was reading it and,
No.
yeah.
So, number one, code enforcement site, for things exclusively within the ambit of the code enforcement officer, the site inspection or visit is optional. It's a may. And this, and under 3.2.2, it's mandatory.
right.
And, I mean, that makes sense, okay. The other comment is that, the final paragraph and the last sentence of the preceding paragraph, those two need to be tied in, I think.
Okay.
So what I would do would be combine, starting where it says within 12 days, I would break that off as the start of the next paragraph. And, after where it says final decision of the application, put in or, submit it to the planning, recommend it be submitted. So that it's clear that the 12 days applies to either outcome.
Okay, so the within 12 days is where the paragraph should start.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Also, in the next paragraph, just grammatically to be really clear, the town planner and the code enforcement officer, comma, after
Okay.
reviewing an application for completeness, comma, may at their discretion, so that you've got those two thoughts
You must have had the
separated.
same English teacher I did.
And when I
Girls Latin
You
school.
shouldn't be
and Sanford, when I said that earlier, I just reading it out loud and saying applicant and complete so many times, I figured that's where the comments were going to be, that there's probably too many completes in there. But maybe that's just
About
me.
An application, it will be
I mean,
done.
I feel I was repeating myself.
Just kind of, I mean,
You're being very careful, though, to be precise, I think, so.
Right.
I mean, basically, what's going on here is that the planner and the CEO have three options. One is to deny an application, one is
Right.
to grant an application, or a third, refer
Refer to the planning board. Yep.
And so maybe the way to structure that would be within 12 days of determining the application is the town, shall, one.
So
This-
shall, and then provide a.
Right.
Three options.
Three options.
Yeah.
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 Shall.
One, two, or three. Grant the application, two, deny the application, or three, refer it to the planning board.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
easier than trying to plow through the paragraph, yeah.
Okay. All right. 3.2.3, planning board review. Within 14 days of receiving an application, the town planner shall determine if the application is complete and notify the applicant in writing that the application is complete, or if incomplete, the specific material needed to make the application complete. The town planner shall conduct a site visit of the proposed activity before deeming the application complete. The applicant shall be responsible for providing the additional material to make the application complete. After determining that the application is complete, the town planner shall place the application on the planning board agenda
Yep.
for review and make the applicable public hearing notifications for the planning board meeting. In no case shall complete, take out the B.
Yeah,
In no case shall complete applications.
shall A complete,
Shall A complete.
isn't it? Or should the complete?
In no case shall,
The complete application take longer than 60 days to be placed? Because
I
it's
would
a specific one, right? It's not A, it's a specific,
yeah,
thing
but
that has gone
there's,
through this
but there's
process.
gonna be more than one, there's more than one complete application, that's,
Wait.
so this is the last sentence of paragraph 2. In no case shall blank complete application take longer than 60 days to be placed on the planning board agenda.
I think it's A.
Okay?
well, you're saying after determining that the application is complete.
So they have to
Therefore, in
match.
no case shall the complete application take longer. You're still referring to the same one, so it's got to be either consistently the, I would think, right?
But,
What's the gist of this, I guess?
what do you mean?
Well, Article D, A or,
Well, I mean, so you've got,
Are we saying the application,
Yeah.
the application take no longer than 60 days or A?
Step one, the town planner has to, within, there's 14 days, the town planner has to review and notify that the applicant that it's either complete or.
Incomplete.
Okay.
Perhaps it should say, in no case shall any complete application take longer than 60 days.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because then you're not referring to that specific one.
I think that's actually the better one. Any complete application?
Shall any complete, in other words, that applies to
Right.
everybody.
In no case shall any complete application.
So let me ask a question here. I mean, I'm sure I could find it.
Mhm.
The significance of being placed on the planning board agenda is what? That triggers a time requirement on the planning board, right?
Right, because the planning board does only meet once a month, or at least the chair can call a minimum.
Who
once
is
a month.
responsible for putting an application on the planning board's agenda?
The town planner,
The town planner.
yes.
Why would it, I mean, why wouldn't, once it's complete, why wouldn't it go on immediately?
'Cause we only meet once a month.
Right.
Yeah, they
Well,
may have already
they're
been
requ-
booked.
I should phrase this. They're required to only meet once a month. They could certainly call another meeting. For example,
Okay. So
Well,
what
at
you-
least
so-
in-
no, so what you're saying here is that within 60 days of
So
the
2 months.
determination that the application is complete,
right,
it shall be on the
Planning board agenda.
on the agenda for a planning board meeting to be held within 60 days.
correct.
Okay.
Because we actually had an example of this with the, I think it was the AT&T application, where we had to have it come to the planning board within 30 days, or else it would automatically be approved. And we also have sometimes, in the winter especially, when the weather's so bad, people can't come out and the office is closed. So that's the main thing of it. We don't want someone to be held up in a planning board limbo for ages.
So, I mean, but basically, the 60 days applies to the date of the meeting
Right.
for which the agenda is prepared,
Correct.
okay? You know, so just, you know, I mean, it's not a question of putting, within 60 days, putting on an agenda for a meeting 6 months away.
To be placed, how about to be placed on an upcoming planning board agenda?
To be held within 60 days.
To take, okay, so in no case shall any complete application, so so how about a complete application shall be placed on a planning board agenda within 60 days?
To be held within 60 days.
Okay.
Or a meeting agenda, whatever. You're right.
Application shall be placed on the planning board agenda for a meeting, or a planning board meeting held within 60 days.
If you think about the calendar, say somebody came in on February 2nd, but the planning board had just had a meeting on February 1st.
Yep.
So
They'd
they
have to wait
said,
a
well,
month.
okay, I'll wait till March 2nd then, but would the planning board at that point be already booked so that they would have to wait the 3rd
Nope,
month?
we would, I mean, we don't usually have those types of situations, but anyone who does come in with a completed application, they're always put on first in the next agenda. So
Yeah.
unless there's so much undone work in February,
Yeah,
yeah. But we usually get through that pretty quick. All right, so that's the last sentence we'll read. A complete application shall be placed on the planning board agenda for a planning board meeting held within 60 days. Yes?
Yep.
yeah.
Okay. The applicant shall provide the town planner with 10 complete copies of the complete application and any supporting documents at least 14 days prior to the planning board public hearing.
Didn't we change that to less than 10 copies?
I think it was 3 paper copies and 1 digital copy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wasn't that in the minutes?
Yep.
I would substitute all for any before supporting documents.
And all supporting them. Yeah. With 3. With 3 complete 3 complete paper and 1 digital.
Well,
Maybe better late than never, I don't know.
I don't know. Don't worry about it. And all supporting documents at least 14 days prior to the planning board public hearing. George, do you have a copy of Articles 1 through, you do not have?
I realized it was 6 o'clock and it said,
Holy
I bet-
cow.
Holy cow, I bet I've, so no, I don't.
Does it, Sarah, do you mind sharing with George?
Sure.
Just because I don't wanna run out while we're
Right.
in the midst of doing this.
We are.
So we're on page 10 right now.
I have an extra set here.
Oh, you do? Okay. So you're all set, thank you. All right. The planning board may conduct a site visit of the proposed activity.
When?
When they may do
Prior
it?
to the hearing or after the hearing?
No,
Or-
we decide at the meeting whether we're going to do a site plan.
Right.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, usually the planning board, does have the option to call for a site visit any time. I don't think that's ever been done yet.
It has, but it was before you.
Okay, never mind then. Within 35 days of the public hearing or within another time as may be mutually agreed to by the planning board and the applicant, the planning board shall make a final decision on the application. The planning board may extend the review period if it requires additional studies or materials to be submitted. The planning board may require the applicant to the planning
I-
board may, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have a question about the paragraph before.
Okay.
Within 35 days of the public hearing.
Mhm.
Does that mean within 35 days of the planning board meeting? Or within another time? I don't know that we've ever done that. I mean, we always make a decision at the planning board meeting. It's either reject, request more materials, or accept.
Right, the public hearing is at the planning board meeting, so it would be one and the
They're
same.
one and the same?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But 35 days?
Do these hearings ever go over more than one day?
Yeah, if an applicant, if there's a situation where an applicant doesn't really have a complete application or questions arise and we want more information,
Right.
it could go to another meeting.
With that in mind, what I would say was within 35 days of the conclusion of the public hearing.
The conclusion of,
Just out of curiosity, how'd you arrive at 35?
Bill would have to answer that, and he is not here.
I mean, doesn't everything go in sort of month increments?
Again, I'm not sure why 35 days was chosen.
You know, if you look, going back here, the time requirements, you know, depending upon the complexity of the review, you know, start at 10 days and get longer.
Okay, so this is
That is-
part of a continuum?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
And what kinds of things would happen during those 35 days that would trigger this language?
kind of knows.
Well, I mean, you know, what the planning board typically meets once a month,
Mhm.
right? And, you know, if people need to cogitate on something a little bit, you know, they can put off voting on it and people can think about it.
Yeah.
People on the planning board?
Yeah, if we run into a problem and something seems like inconclusive or there's some sort of glitch and nobody can really come up with a yes or no answer, we can table it.
Right.
Well, I guess what I'm reacting to, and it hasn't happened to me, but if somebody puts in a plan that would otherwise be, you know, meet all the requirements, and somebody just doesn't like it during the public comment period for whatever reason, but it has met all the criteria, is that where this 35 days floats into
It
action?
shouldn't,
It shouldn't. It,
because we shouldn't be making decisions like that.
That's exactly what I hoped you'd say.
And-
Good.
and usually in those cases, and I'm glad the planning board always recognizes this on their own, if someone just comes in and says, I don't like this application, that doesn't hold merit. But if it's a neighbor who says, I know what this person's gonna do, and I can tell you it's gonna be this and this and that, and I can show you with exhibits A, B, and C, then that's a lot
Yeah.
more to consider.
Yeah, we are
Okay.
tasked to hear the public's comments.
Right.
I think there was only one time where the planning board, I think it's just been the one time when Dan Goldenson wanted to do the bar, and neighbors complained, so it had to be tabled for another month.
Yeah.
That was
I think that was more than that.
maybe 2 months even.
Well, I mean, I think there was more than one situation like that, but, I guess I'd kind of be curious to know where this 35 days comes from, because it seems a little bit arbitrary, or it doesn't follow, you know, what is it based on?
If
Maybe-
you meet once a month,
Mhm.
is it usually a month between meetings? I mean, do you sort of
It's
like
like
pick one in the
certain
first
Wednesday
week,
of
because
the-
that would
It's the
be
second Wednesday
35
of the
days.
month.
Okay, so that would be about 35 days.
Yeah,
If somebody came in,
Yeah,
if
that-
somebody could only come on the Wednesday,
Seems to
say,
me that's-
I will,
yeah,
then they would be 35 days before the next Wednesday, frequently on the calendar,
yeah.
I would think.
I will ask Bill about where the 35 days comes from,
They're
so that
probably
he can
giving a little
clarify.
bit of leeway, maybe.
That's
Oh,
probably,
but you say it's consistent when you,
Well, it's consistent, but then there is sometimes a weather issue, or,
Yeah.
I don't know that we've ever not
Yeah,
met
I
a
suppose,
quorum, but.
I suppose where it
Yeah.
says within, that just means don't go beyond that.
yeah.
But it could be.
But you
that-
might need an extra day for one
Yeah.
reason, their holiday falls on it or
Right.
something, yeah.
so, I'll ask Bill about 35 days. Next, the planning board may require the applicant to perform additional studies, submit additional materials, or hire a consultant to review the application of portions thereof. The cost of the additional studies, additional materials, or consultant shall be borne by the applicant.
And
Okay, so,
do you,
a question.
Okay,
Does the applicant hire the consultant, or does the planning board hire the consultant?
no, the applicant
the
does.
applicant,
What?
the applicant. The applicant
Yeah,
will
it
hire, the-
says, yeah.
yeah.
Well, so,
Also,
I mean, hire consultant acceptable to the planning board?
In that category for which we need more information.
Right,
But
if,
the applicant could hire whatever consultant they want, but if we need an architect, they could, I mean,
Well, I mean,
I can't imagine that, but they would have to,
it's the planning board who feels the need
for more
for the input
information.
from a consultant. So the planning board ought to be at least establishing the criteria or the qualifications.
if someone wants to, I don't know, put in a road and it's gonna be very close to wetland, for example,
Yeah.
and they just say, well, I eyed it myself and I can tell you it's gonna be 1,000 feet from the wetland. But you're looking at the plans and it's clearly right next to it. The planning board could say, well, we'd prefer if you hired a consultant, a land surveyor or an engineer, someone along those lines to confirm this, just so,
Would the adjective before consultant qualified be helpful?
yeah, it could be his uncle.
Well, the planning board could always take the position, I don't think you're qualified.
that too.
Yeah. And again, from being on the applicant side, I can tell you that words like that, and I'm not saying they're incorrect, but words like that send shivers down, like, you suppose they're gonna wanna prove that there's no archaeological artifacts anywhere in this 10 acres?
An Egyptian tomb.
Well, no, I mean, there is language that
Yeah.
says you might,
Yeah, no,
you might have to require, I mean, it can be, it hasn't happened to me, because I try and be pretty careful and do my stuff ahead of time, but there's times when it's appeared almost punitive. But that's hard to, I don't know, if there's any way to handle that, because it is at the discretion of the planning board. Do you need to determine there's no Indian artifacts here? Is there an endangered species living there that we heard someone say?
So are we including the word qualified consultant, or are we, what's everyone asking for?
I mean, the question then, who determines the qualifications? I mean, it's
Yeah.
sort of like a,
Yeah.
one other thing I would suggest there, the planning board, we'll go through this, submit additional material, I would say and/or, so that it's.
And/or hire a consultant?
Yeah, so that those things aren't all mutually exclusive.
Wouldn't you, as on the planning board, wouldn't you have an opportunity, if someone presented something supposedly from a consultant, it didn't look right, wouldn't you have the
Well, one thing to remember is
ability to
that
say, no?
we get all of these materials 10 days ahead,
Wow.
and we review it all before the meeting, so we
Or at
might.
least you're supposed to.
We come to the meeting, and we might have notes, like if something needs clarification ahead of
Yeah,
time.
okay.
Yeah.
And at the meeting, there are 7 planning board members, and Max is here, and sometimes Bill is here too, so there's plenty of conversation going on for like a check and balance, like, if somebody got really punitive, we would probably, somebody
Balance
else
it,
would
yeah.
probably balance that
Yeah.
out.
And the other thing is, in terms of, the applicant picks the consultant. If the planning board doesn't find the consultant credible.
We can say so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the burden is on the applicant, not the.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
And the applicant is paying for that consultant, and so I really think the applicant should decide
Yeah, okay.
who's a consultant and which,
If
Who to
there's a
hire.
professional engineer's stamp or an architect's stamp, I mean, there's things that would be pretty hard to say, well, that person wasn't qualified if they've got,
And in fact, that could be his Uncle Harry.
yeah, yeah.
I withdraw my suggestion of qualified then.
All right, but I will include the and/or part.
I think that's
Yeah.
good.
All right.
One more thing. You help me out here. Shall be born, isn't it B-O-R-N-E? Like the wisp of feathers
I
was
just- I
born
just have-
on the, huh?
All right.
Yeah, be born. yes.
B-O-R-N-E.
Yeah. Why don't you
Bio
just say paid?
paid
Paid,
for,
yeah.
paid for by the
Yes,
applicant.
yes, that's better.
Okay. 3.3, general requirements. 3.3.1, waivers. An applicant may submit a written waiver request from one or more, a submission, hold on. An applicant may.
Doesn't need
Yeah. From one or more submission requirement, if it
I
can.
think
the A. One or more
Requirements, yeah, plural.
requirements, yeah.
Requirements. If it can be shown that the submission is inapplicable, unnecessary, or inappropriate for the review. If approved, the applicable submission requirement,
Comma.
Yeah.
If approved, comma.
if, the-
Yeah, okay.
wait, if approved, comma, okay. The applicable submission requirement will not be required for the completed application.
That's a funny sentence, if what's approved.
The
waiver
applicable
request,
submission
The waiver request.
I guess if the waiver request is approved, yeah.
will not be required, yeah. 3.3.2, rights not vested. The submittal of an application for review shall not constitute the start of the review process for the purpose of bringing an application under provisions of 1 MRSA Section 302. The formal review process shall commence upon notification to an applicant that a complete application has been submitted. 3.3.3, decisions.
So wait a minute. So what that says is that all of these things where you're counting days doesn't start until a planning board has told the applicant that everything that they need, they've got?
The town planner, but yes, or the code enforcement officer. Someone here saying, we have your application.
Complete application.
Complete
Yeah,
application.
Not necessarily a correct application.
Right, but.
the planning board is
well-
only supposed to receive completed applications.
Well, this is for the code enforcement officer, town planner, or any approval process. So,
But does that preclude the possibility that the planning board's gonna say, wait a minute, we gotta check for Indian artifacts?
this may not be the planning board, this may be the code enforcement
right,
officer
uh,
approval.
But could it be the planning board?
It could.
So has this tied the planning board's feet together that they can't ask for additional information if they've already characterized it as complete?
No.
This isn't a complete application, or, hold on.
It says it is, though.
The submittal of an application for review shall not constitute the start, yeah,
Yeah.
shall not constitute the start of the review process for the purpose of bringing an application under this section. Formal review process shall commence upon notification to an applicant that a complete application has been submitted. So for that then goes back to what the review process is for everything under 3.2 for the different review processes.
But if I was told you've submitted a complete application, and then at the planning board meeting, they said, well, this isn't complete, you need to come up with blankety blank blank blank, would that create confusion? I don't know what the answer is, but it seems
So
like,
the planning board does, because the planning board meets only once a month, it's a bit hard for average Joe to come into my office, give me the application, then I go to the planning board and say, this is the application, without me saying it's complete. And then they say, well, where's this, where's that, where's this? So the applicant then has to wait a month just to then resubmit, only for the planning board to say, well, you took this out, you took that out, and it keeps going back and forth. The complete application is from what the planner deems as complete, but the planning board can see it otherwise.
Yeah, the intent is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Max, but the intent is for somebody to come into the planning office, go through the application with Max, and Max could say, we need this, that, and the other thing. And the intent is for the planning board to get a complete application. However, in 7 people discussing it with varying levels of detail paranoia, they might say, well, I think we need more of this.
Would it be,
Or
So-
more of
would it be
that.
And
useful
it's-
to say at the very end of this, planning board may require additional supporting documentation on that paragraph?
That's, I would say again, just reread 3.2.3, the planning board process, where it says, the town planner shall determine if the application is complete, and then notify the applicant. And then at the bottom, it says, the planning board may require the applicant to perform additional studies, submit additional materials, and/or hire the consultant.
And my comment about detail paranoia was really just a joke. We're very reasonable.
Well, I'm sure you are. That wasn't, I'm just looking for language things that could potentially create confusion.
Yeah, because it seems to me at that point that just because they come in and fill out an application, it hasn't been approved.
Yeah, well, the
Right.
project haven't been approved. There's 2 steps. There's.
But the application has to be
Right.
approved,
Right.
correct?
What this section is saying is, once someone hands it in and the planner says,
It, meaning all the
The
boxes
application.
are checked.
yep, whatever it is, you could give me a piece of paper that just says, I'm gonna build a 20,000 square foot building in my backyard. If I took that piece of paper and I said, okay, this application is complete in my eyes, then it goes back to either the code enforcement officer, the joint code enforcement officer, town planner, or the planning board. I give it to whoever that is, and they then look at the application themselves and say, this isn't complete. What are you doing? You should be fired for thinking this is complete.
I'm trying to save your,
No, and that's fair. So
Do you have your resume up to date?
if there was, or see paragraph 3B above or something. It just seems like there ought to be some way so that the person doesn't foolishly think it's complete just because they thought you both agreed it was complete.
Yeah, I agree with you, because it sounds like.
It's either complete or not complete, yeah.
A complete application, and it isn't necessarily.
And in fact, on
complete
those
at that stage.
applications, I think you, like, if it did say, I think there's things you put NA next to because they clearly don't relate to your
right.
application. But the planning board conceivably
I
could
could
reconsider.
For that last sentence, I could say the formal review process under 3.2 of this section of this article shall commence upon notification.
Yes, perfect,
Yeah,
perfect,
yeah,
perfect, perfect.
yeah.
Formal review process.
Aren't you glad I remembered to come?
Just in time, too.
Under 3.2 of this article.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. So, next paragraph,
He said tentatively.
3.3.3 decisions. Well, I also just like saying that, 3.3.3 decisions.
Right.
After review of a complete application, the municipal reviewer shall determine whether the application meets the review criteria. A written decision to approve the application with conditions, or deny the application shall be made and delivered to the applicant. The decision of the planning board shall follow a vote by the board. Shall follow a majority vote by the board?
So, and that is the decision on the project, not the decision on the application.
What's the municipal reviewer?
Yeah, I think you want to change that to planner and code enforcement officer.
Well, that could be the code enforcement officer, the town planner, or the planning board.
Right. If you want to, well,
Well, you, with the appropriate, you know.
I think we should keep it consistent with the wording
So,
from before.
Titles in there instead of just municipal reviewer.
Yeah.
I mean, either, two things occur to me. Let's see, where is this? 3.2.
okay.
Reviewed by one of the following.
Mm-hmm.
And then in parentheses, after planning board, the quote municipal reviewer, close quote.
Okay.
Good idea.
So for 3.2, putting in parentheses municipal reviewer. So that we're not changing.
That provides some context for,
So,
But
So-
I do think it needs to be made clear whether meeting review criteria means the project is accepted or not. Or is this still, because we have spent time deciding whether the application is even done yet. I don't know, frankly, is this about approving the plan or about approving the process, the application, excuse me?
so this is following rights not vested. So after the town planner has approved it, this is whether the CEO, town planner, or planning board is saying that this is a complete application. And they are fine with it, they approve it.
They approve the
Approve
application.
the application,
A-
yeah,
Application.
Not the project.
right.
Well, application projects, well, I'll say project if that's
well, read the following sentence.
for conditions of approval.
A written decision.
A written decision to approve the application, approve the app.
application or deny shall be made, delivered. I mean, so that's the point at which, who has, whichever of these three,
Yeah, whoever's doing it,
Right.
you know, has reached a decision.
right, that it, yes, go ahead and build it, or
Yes or
don't.
no.
Yeah.
Right.
And if it's yes, maybe an absolute yes, or maybe a yes with conditions.
Would the word plan or proposal be more clear than application? Where we have spent time defining what a complete application is?
Because if, for instance, if they deny the application with conditions, then it's not a complete application yet.
Well, it could be complete.
No,
Well,
that's
no,
the
I
next- that's
yeah,
what
I
I
guess it would
So
not be.
they have to
right.
come back and
It's
say,
something else.
Not
Yeah.
exactly, that's the next that's the next
No, I mean, but where it
subsection
says
we're gonna be.
approve the application with conditions, that means, you know, you have to put a stoplight at the bottom of the
yeah,
road.
he can't go ahead at that point,
You know,
right?
no,
Well-
no, they
But we
should-
can
Yeah.
approve,
But if-
approve an
if the-
application with conditions.
If the
Right,
applicant's
and that's the
willing
next
to
part we'll
accept those
talk about.
conditions, you know, then it's a go.
But do they have to then submit, or this is all in writing, I assume, right? Okay.
Sometimes the conditions are state items. Usually, if it's a bigger project, someone has to come to the local level first.
Yeah.
So then they can start the domino effect. I think this is what happened with American Unagi, where where Sarah, already had some things lined up and needed to get permits from American
Oh,
Army,
right,
the Army
yeah,
Corps.
the timing, yeah.
But with us first, it's the condition of, okay, you got the local approval, but get the state and federal approval next.
Yeah.
Before everything is finalized.
Right, before
Yeah.
you can start building,
Yeah.
get these things done.
And that was in
Right.
writing, as I
I
recall.
mean, what happens is that the state and/or the feds they won't consider anything until the town signed off on it.
Right.
Yeah. So you're between a rock and a hard place
Well,
sometimes.
you know,
Or in some other cases, if a person, I think some of the restaurants we've had come to us recently, their license is gonna expire maybe 2 weeks after we're supposed to review them. So one of the conditions may be have an updated license.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. All the ducks in a row.
right. So, are we still on decisions or conditions of approval?
Well, so 333,
Yes.
if you have that decision to approve, that means you can go ahead and make your plans to build this thing.
Right. Written decision to approve the application, yes.
and that would be within the time defined with respect to the particular reviewer.
Yes.
The-
For whatever the review process was under 3.2.
Yeah.
Would it be clearer, or would it be more clear to say,
A written decision to approve the proposal?
yes,
Okay.
so that it's very clear that we're done putting check marks down and now we like the plan?
All
Done
right.
with the paperwork.
Yeah.
Is everyone else fine with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So 3.3.4, conditions of approval. Upon consideration of the review criteria, the municipal reviewer may attach such conditions to the application that it finds necessary to further the purposes of the ordinance. Conditions are limited to further address items already contained in this ordinance. A condition may not be imposed to regulate an item not specifically addressed in this ordinance. Upon determining whether conditions are appropriate, the municipal reviewer shall consider the unique features of the site and surrounding conditions, proposed use, and the proposed structures. A written finding of fact shall be created stating the unique features of the proposal and how the conditions will further the purposes of this ordinance. All conditions shall be listed in the permit and shall be enforceable under this ordinance.
You want to capitalize ordinance. Second line from the last.
Yep,
Further-
I see it.
In the first paragraph there, shouldn't you say, the municipal reviewer may attach blah, 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 that he or she finds necessary? You say that it finds necessary. I don't think the municipal reviewer isn't
Well,
it.
but the municipal reviewer.
I could say
may be
they-
The board, so, the planning board, so.
How about the application that they find necessary to further the purposes? Because it could be the,
Yeah.
because the code enforcement officer is the one time it's a singular person.
Yeah, but it can't be it. That's my point. It isn't the board.
They
He
find
specifically
necessary.
is saying
Right.
the municipal reviewer, who's
Right.
a person.
The further the purposes of the ordinance, that's, would it be, does it say the same thing to say comply with the ordinance?
Further,
Further the purposes sounds a little more tricky than just we met the rules,
well,
to me.
that goes to Article 1 for general, which this is probably the only time where we should have done Article 1 first. But because under Article 1, 1.3, it does list the purposes of this ordinance. So, and it lists 20 items, going from implementing provisions of the comprehensive plan, to promoting traffic safety, all the way to attracting new businesses that are consistent with goals of preserving small town atmosphere. So it's those 20 items that it's primarily talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, when you say that, then it makes more sense.
Okay,
So,
I'm not hung up on
It's
that.
referring to the
so we could have,
the original provisions.
so there may be, well,
Well, you
Go
could
ahead.
say comply with the purposes of the audience.
Comply with the intent,
apply with,
comply with the intent of the ordinance?
Well, that's the same thing, furthering the purposes.
yeah.
What I would suggest is, purpose of the ordinance enumerated in Article 1.3,
To further the purposes of this ordinance
as enumerated.
Yeah,
as
I think that's a
Yeah.
good idea.
In
Enumerated.
Section 1.3 of Article 1,
section
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
which,
1.3,
defines.
Article 1.
I guess that gets the point of waivers and that's reminding the applicant that there's a big picture here that the planning board is trying to
Yeah.
fit into,
Well,
which
well, I think,
could be the beginning of an endless discussion or the explanation that ends the discussion.
one example of this may have been, I like using American Unagi as the example, actually. One thing leading up to it was how the water going into the Madomic River, how that was going to affect the shell fishermen.
Right.
So that's why a big chunk of it was DEP's, approval of it, as well as telling the Shellfish Commission that this was even coming, so that if they had any issue, they could certainly speak up, but they didn't have any problem with it at the time, and I don't believe they have any issue right now.
No, well, it's moving ahead.
It's moving ahead, so, but that's just an example, because it's,
And that's actually a perfect example also, back to when I
because of the
first got
clean
here.
water, yeah.
Of, there could be a concern raised during the process that you had not anticipated that would warrant further investigation. If somebody had said, wait a minute, that's a terrible idea, what about my clams? Then that's something that wouldn't have been kind of a predetermined
Yeah.
thing to address necessarily, that would be a citizen bringing up a question that warrants.
Legitimate.
Yeah, it's not
Concern.
arbitrary, it's a reasonable
Yeah.
question.
All right, so, Moving on to 3.3.5, permit issued after municipal review. Final decision of an application review from the town planner and the planning board shall be provided to the code enforcement officer. If approved or approved with conditions, the code enforcement officer shall issue a permit for the proposed activity.
That makes it sound like the CEO can issue a permit whether it's approved or whether or if there are conditions, but what you really mean is that the code enforcement officer can approve it immediately or approve it after the conditions have been met.
Because they wouldn't approve it if the conditions hadn't been met, right?
Right.
Is it,
So it kind of makes it, yeah, it makes it sound a little bit like they will approve it, not checking on that the
Yeah, carte
conditions have
blanche.
been,
Yeah.
that the conditions have been fulfilled.
because if the planning board says, we can approve this application pending another piece of information or whatever,
Right.
That's not a
Like-
final decision, is it?
yeah, it is, well, in effect it is.
The final decision of an application review from the town planner and the planning board shall be provided to the code enforcement officer.
I mean, but that would be once the planning board, you know,
They've approved it,
has
right?
held its hearing, you know, if it has requested further information and received and considered that information and made a definitive decision, right?
We can approve the application, but it could be pending it's usually a fairly minor piece of information.
But you have to receive that.
The code enforcement officer
Yeah,
receives it,
he's-
not the planning
Right.
Yeah, he's the gate, he's the guard at the
He's the
gate.
Right.
gatekeeper.
Gate is the word I was looking for.
So-
yeah.
No permit will be given until those conditions have been met.
Right,
Right.
right,
So that's what you want clarified in here.
It's
Yeah.
not very clear.
yeah.
If approved. Okay, so,
Permit is issued
The-
subsequent to,
The conditions being met.
Yeah, the code enforcement officer shall issue a permit for the proposed activity if the application is
satisfaction of the
approved
conditions.
or,
Yeah.
yeah,
Conditions met.
upon conditions being met.
okay. 3.3.6, boundary survey requirements. Code enforcement officer, the town planner, or the planning board may require the applicant to submit a survey of the perimeter of the tract, giving complete descriptive data by bearings and distances, made and certified by a registered land surveyor.
Capital L.
Yeah, I don't know why that wasn't capitalized. The survey may be required for the construction of new structures or any construction proposed on an undeveloped tract or parcel of land, whenever the municipal reviewer finds that a survey is necessary to show compliance with requirements of this ordinance due to the size of the lot, location of the lot, or the placement of existing or proposed structures on the lot or neighboring properties.
Well, that's hanging something or
Yeah.
other.
Yeah,
Also, you don't need the comma after whenever. That belongs to the rest of that sentence.
What-
Whenever the municipal.
what is the-
reviewer-
what's the 5-word translation of that to what you're trying to do there?
just a summary of 3.3.6?
Yes, well, I mean, haven't they already
Where does the
submitted,
structure sit on the property?
but that's part of
Right.
the application.
Well, that's what the plan is for, to demonstrate
Well,
that.
that shouldn't be a separate sentence, right?
But wouldn't you already
Due to
Right,
the
I
require?
size
think-
of the lot, comma, location without
Right, I think that's the
capital L, yeah,
mistake.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, you know, that's just to assure that, you know, the sideline and setback requirements are being met.
But wouldn't, I think that was part of the complete application in the first place.
So,
Well, in the land use ordinance, it says when you need a survey done
right.
and when you
Well,
don't.
in one of these cases, if someone is just changing the use of a building in downtown, we don't need a survey. It's not
Right.
really required. But if,
That would be not applicable back in the application.
right, but if, well, like, the office is at the top of the hills there. You remember that one?
Office at the top of the hill.
Insurance.
The insurance one, Cornerstone?
Oh, yeah.
They insisted not to bring in a map, but we had a neighbor who said, hey, my right-of-way could be at risk, so a map was required. Now, it wasn't a boundary survey, but it was a map saying it's gonna be this feet away. So the boundary survey is just how more specific, I guess, we want the construction to be. That makes sense.
To use the eel project as a example of something, the permit that they got blessed had
Right.
beautiful drawings with dimensions and headings and everything
Right.
on it. And that parcel, the 6 acres that they are working with,
Right.
actually took land from 2 different existing parcels on the town map.
Right.
I don't think that anybody in Wiscasset knows about this new parcel that changes, and I'm asking because I promised I would. I think I think that the person who requested that has to actually have a defined parcel that is different than the 2 parcels that it's made from. I think something has to be filed in Wiscasset on that.
Right. Well, you own both lots, correct?
Yes.
So, I mean, I can get to the whole detail. As long as you own both lots, you're fine right now, but it is recommended you maybe carve it out so that that's its own lot, so that if something happens and you need
Yeah.
to sell
Yeah,
one part of it,
exactly,
then, yeah. So you should be doing that, especially now while you're
But the,
thinking about it.
right, but the planning board didn't specifically, and you didn't, the town didn't specifically require it. This is more a prudent thing to do as the
Right.
landowner.
Right. So
Or the
that
leaser
you
or the leasee.
So that you don't have any legal trouble in the future, but
Yeah.
as far as the planning board was concerned, you own both lots, you're
So
fine
they-
for
yeah.
now. But,
Okay. But, I mean, again, that's where these things get
yeah,
a little more complicated.
so that was it, because it's almost, okay. 3.4, public hearing requirements. A public hearing shall be conducted for all planning board application reviews. The town shall make the following public notices a minimum of 10 days prior to the planning board meeting. Post the public hearing notice in the town office. Send a first-class notice of the public hearing to all property abutters, indicating the purpose of the hearing and giving the date, time, and place of the hearing. And publish, that's supposed to be a semicolon. And publish a notice of the public hearing at least 7 days in the town days, and publish a notice of the public hearing at least 7 days,
Days prior.
Do we take the word town out?
at least 7 days prior to the planning board meeting in a newspaper having general circulation in the town, that's a capital T, indicating the purpose of the hearing and giving the date, time, and place of the hearing.
Yeah.
Does the posting the public hearing notice in the town office, that also has those requirements of date, time, and location, right?
I can make a note of that. Post a town office.
So,
With-
what I would
Oh.
suggest is, instead of saying that 3 times, you just say it once, each such notice shall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Each notice containing.
So you can take it out of the 3
Yeah.
specific kinds of notice.
It's much clearer. You know, if you read it at the top instead of wondering if all 3 of those are different. if you
Yeah,
read it at the top,
I mean,
it's more sensible, yeah.
So, shall make the following public notices a minimum of 10 days prior to the planning board meeting, each notice containing the indication of the purpose of the hearing, giving the date, time, and place of the hearing. And then colon. And then it says,
Yeah.
post the public hearing notice in the town office, send a first-class notice of the public hearing to all property abutters, and publish a notice of the public hearing at least 7 days prior to the planning board meeting in a newspaper having general circulation in the town.
Well, but the posting and the first-class mail, that's a 10-day requirement, whereas the publication is a 7-day requirement?
That's because the notice in the public newspaper, we're pretty much dependent on however the newspaper circulation happens.
Right, but I'm
Lincoln
just-
County News and, Lincoln County News and, Courier Gazette, that's it.
Well, but you start off by talking about a minimum of 10 days prior to shall make the following public notices a minimum of 10 days prior to the public planning board meeting, and then all of a sudden you switch on the third category to 7 days.
That's because the,
I understand
That's
the
the
but
practicality.
for that 10 days, I send it out, let's say Friday. You know, it could be sent, everyone could get it on Saturday, or a holiday could happen, and it'll be.
Is it business days
Monday.
or calendar days?
My point is that
Calendar
the
days,
seven, you just need to make clear that, the 7-day requirement for publication is an exception from the general 10-day notice.
I send the notices out 10 days prior to it. That's the difference. I don't, okay, I'll make a note of that. Just that
Just to,
7 days is exception.
That might be, that whole paragraph might be something to bullet. You've got 3 things there, right? And if you made a bullet instead of all the semicolons and, post the public hearing and the notice in the town office. You put the categories of the days at the top, but post that, send a first-class notice, and then publish a notice of the public hearing.
Okay.
Because then it's awfully hard to read that, and you read it and you say, wait a minute, which category am I?
All right.
If you have bullets, it makes it very easy to see the 3 things that are gonna happen.
All right. So I got all that. Bullet points, making sure 7 days is the exception, and putting the indicating purpose of hearing before it all so that the other 2 can have the
Yeah.
language removed.
Yeah,
Okay, next paragraph.
The owners of property,
Can I make a suggestion
yep,
already? What you are trying to communicate there is that you're gonna mail the abutters notices
Yep.
to the address the town has on file for their taxes.
correct.
What about if you just said that?
To be considered. Because for that one, there are, let's say, I don't know.
There's nothing else you can do but mail it to the address they've got in that the town knows.
Because some people lease their land, or some people rent out their land, so
Doesn't that still come out to be the same person?
sometimes no. Sometimes, like,
Who's ever paying the taxes is the one who has the right to.
whoever owns the property, yes.
I was sort of wondering, instead of using the word against, maybe to.
Yeah, that's what,
yeah, to whom?
To whom?
Sounds nasty.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
and you might, instead of just saying the owners of the property, you might say the owners of the abutting property
Okay.
shall be considered those,
The owners of budding properties, yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Properties.
And the point is that if that address doesn't work or they pretend they didn't get it, you don't have to send it out registered, is what this is saying. Unless you do send it out registered.
I send a
First class.
first-class notice.
Okay. So if you send it first class and nobody gets the mail for a month or has abandoned the property,
Then,
that's their problem.
that, yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
So I'll finish reading. Failure of an abutter to receive a notice shall not invalidate the public hearing, nor shall it require the board to schedule a new public hearing. The planning board may vote to continue the public hearing, and in this case, the board shall not be required to meet the notice requirements listed above for the continued public hearing.
You mean if you want to, okay, continue it longer?
So,
So you don't have to resend notices to
right,
to the reconvening date.
but if someone shows up and says, I didn't get my notice in the mail at the the planning board meeting, the planning board could say, well, this person didn't get it, maybe someone else didn't get it, let's table this to next, let's extend the public hearing process, is essentially what it's saying. 3.6, submission requirements. Let me quickly check something. Okay. 3.6, submission requirements. 3.6.1, submission requirements for all types of review. 3.6.1.1, an applicant shall submit a completed application to the code enforcement officer or the planner, who will issue a dated receipt and transmit the application to the appropriate municipal reviewer. 3.6,
Right, that is a complete application?
completed application.
You want to say preliminary application, or?
Yeah, because the applicant might think it's complete, but upon review by you, you might see that it is not complete.
At which point the process hasn't yet started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This
How
is,
about- can you
this is
say-
assuming this is a completed application, I believe.
This is interesting that this comes after all this other discussion about what's a complete application.
Because,
Well, you're just, aren't you just asking for submission requirements? And
Mhm.
I could get an application, fill it out, and give it to you. But you haven't reviewed it yet. So.
Oh, I see,
this
submission
just-
as opposed, yeah, right.
This just talks about somebody giving it to you, right?
right,
Okay. So an applicant shall submit an application and just leave out the word completed?
an application,
Because that decision hasn't been made yet at that point.
all right?
And then you're gonna give them a dated receipt just to let everybody know that you received the information that you got.
And then, but the rest of the sentence then says, and transmit the application to the appropriate municipal reviewer.
Yeah, that means that if you need the code enforcement person to see it, or somebody else doesn't see it, right? Or when somebody brings an application into, they don't leave it at the front office.
Yeah, but, no, but that just triggers
Yeah, that-
the preliminary review period. I mean, so you get the receipt,
Right,
which starts the 10 or 12 or 14-day
right.
initial period, but when you use the word completed application,
Yeah,
that
it isn't
implies
yet.
that,
Someone has judged it complete.
Yeah.
Yes.
right,
Yeah, so we're gonna leave out
Yeah.
the word completed.
I would say preliminary application.
I would not
Well,
use that word.
because-
Unless that means
Yeah.
something different.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does, because we sometimes hear preliminary applications. They're not a formal application, they're just somebody coming in saying, here's my idea, what do you guys think about it?
Yeah.
What else do I need to know?
Take a look here.
And that we call a preliminary application.
That's actually pre-application. I shouldn't have been using the word preliminary in the first year. But that's more my fault.
It's a facially completed application.
I'm fine sticking with an application.
Your job is on thin ice, I can.
I do resumes, in my spare time, just so you know.
Oh, God, we're not nice.
3.6.1.2. An application for review shall be submitted on the forms provided by the town of Waldeboro, include all applicable attachments as necessary. 3.6.1.3. Name, address, email address, mailing address, and telephone number of the applicant, applicant's agent, design professional, and contractors.
As
It needs-
applicable.
There needs to be a verb there someplace. Oh, no, this is submission requirements. It does not
Yeah.
need to be a verb, all right.
All right.
And maybe if applicable on the email address, I don't think you're requiring people to have email,
If applicable.
right? Or optional.
And the address, an address should not be capitalized, if all the others aren't. Name should be, obviously, but not that one.
So those were just the two changes?
Yeah.
Okay. 3.6.1.4, property location, map and lot number, a copy of the tax map showing the property and surrounding location.
So what is a property location? Street number?
Property location. Yes.
The-
So 3.6.1.3 is the,
Street address.
nope, that's for the person's personal
Right.
contact information. 3.6.1.4, that's where the proposed project's gonna be. So perhaps for 1.3, should I just say the developer's name, address, and all, or the or the
Applicants?
applicants, yes.
Yeah.
The applicants,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
and then for 1.4, the projects.
Right.
Yeah.
How does one get a copy of the tax map showing the property and surrounding locations now? It used to be you could get it on the town website, but that seems to be difficult.
You get one right here at the town office by asking me nicely, which I will keep
You're
in mind the
a-
next time you come into my office.
I should have stayed home. Okay, that's a good answer. Couldn't have, yep.
3.6. I'm just gonna not do the 3.6s for the next few
That's
Okay.
fine.
dozen.
Time is,
Just say
1.5.
5, 6, 7.
Verification of the applicant's right, title, and interest in the property. 1.6, the appropriate application fees. 1.7, estimated cost of the proposal and proposed construction schedule, including beginning and completion dates.
isn't the appropriate application fee determined by the next line by 1.7? How do you calculate the application fee?
Square footage.
So not anything to do with the estimated cost?
None unless we change that anytime soon.
Okay.
1.8, a written description of the proposed project. 1.9, the anticipated start and completion dates for the project. Indicate if the project will be developed in phases. 1.10, a list of all other local, state, and federal permits approvals required for the project. 1.11,
Stop, just, so, how does the typical applicant know what all those other permits are?
Max tells them.
sometimes I tell them, sometimes they do know it off the top of their head. Sometimes they know it coming in. Sometimes they have hired a consultant like Gartley and Dorsey who does all the work for them.
Yeah.
Uh,
But if you're receiving the application, you're gonna be the one who has to agree that they've
Right.
met that requirement. So that would presume that you also could tell them what's required.
Correct.
Should we say that?
A li-
I don't think so.
No.
Okay.
I mean, I think the onus is on the applicant to
Yeah.
make that determination, however he decides to pursue that. He can talk to the local people, he can, you know, have his, you know, construction lawyer tell him, or whatever.
I would be a little,
I will mark that as come back to.
as an applicant, I would be saying, oh, God, I wonder if I've got them all yet. And have I checked to see if there's Indian artifacts and who do I, you know?
But that's just a list of what's required, not that they've been obtained.
Right, but I'm not sure how, I wouldn't know the list of what's required. I'll just say it from
Well, I
words.
mean, you know, if you want to build a nuclear reactor, I mean,
You probably just need a building permit.
right?
I think most individual applicants don't know
Well,
all these details, and they would just ask you. Bigger projects where they're hiring somebody
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Bartley and
yeah.
Dorsey would.
well, that's just
ahead.
it. Usually, some of the, I'd say, better, smarter, more handsome and dashing people would.
Are you including yourself in
No,
there?
he's
No, I'm
discrediting
saying
me.
no.
okay.
I'm saying the
But
better.
he has Indian artifacts.
I'm saying the applicants. I'm saying I personally love the people who come and just ask before they do anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
For sure.
So I was actually including George in that topic, in that area.
Well, good.
Because if someone,
I always ask.
because if someone comes to me and says, I've built this, done that, and I'm opening next week, I want to get planning board approval tomorrow, I'll laugh at them for a minute, and then,
So cool.
and it's their own fault. And then say, no, that's not how it works. You should have said something a long time ago. I can't really help you if your neighbor complains that you didn't do it right, because you didn't.
Right.
And same thing for the state. I just tell them, contact the state agency if you need to do that.
So I'm not-
Yes, if you have a road coming on and off of, if you have an entrance on a road, you have to know who to ask at the state or not state level.
Right.
And then you would be the one to say, you better check the state on that. That's a state road.
Yep.
Yep.
And then liquor licenses and all those other fun ones. All right, so 1.11, one or more site maps drawn to scale showing all of the following features.
Yeah, it
Should you
should be
say
an
what the
S and a
scale
colon.
is?
Features, colon,
Feature, colon, following
plural,
features,
and then the colon.
and then colon. And then Sarah, you said?
Should you define the scale, you know, what scale it is? Or doesn't that matter?
You want it to fit on a piece of paper is what it boils down to, I think.
Right, and they always have the scale at the bottom.
Yeah, but I mean, do we require a particular scale, or is that just whatever somebody determines will fit on the paper?
Darsky brings in things that cover half the table.
Yeah, I mean,
But they're usually doing bigger projects, and sometimes people, you know,
Yeah,
need this.
it depends on the size of the project. Someone who's gonna do something make a new building downtown, it's probably not gonna be any bigger than
So
what
we should
have.
just leave that out, because you can tell them that.
Right,
when-
and we can ask for a larger scale if we need, or smaller.
And these things are all part of the application
Right,
anyway.
and they gotta fit it all in there somehow, so. So I'll list off all the following features for the site map. 1, property boundaries. 2, land use district boundaries if the property is located in more than one district. 3, setbacks, buffers, and other dimensional requirements. 4, location of right-of-ways and other easements, rights-of-ways and other easements. 5, location and dimensions of all existing and proposed structures. 6, location of all utilities such as sewer, water, gas, and telecommunication lines. 7, location of all existing and proposed subsurface wastewater disposal systems. 8, erosion control plan. 9, locations of all existing and proposed wells. 10, location of existing and proposed fire hydrants, fire ponds, or similar features.
Or-
Fire ponds of similar features, I'm sorry.
Is it fire ponds of or?
Or proposed fire hydrants, fire ponds, or similar features.
I don't know.
11, existing and proposed stormwater features including the flow pattern of all storm drainage. 12, location of all water bodies including ponds, rivers, stream, yeah, and wetlands.
A question on that.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any is there any proximity standard on that?
To what?
Like the high water mark, or
Well-
where the edge of the,
I mean,
It's tidal.
you know, if you're 5 miles inland, you have to show the ocean?
You have a property that's 5 miles from the ocean.
I'm just making, you know, something up.
well,
well-
isn't that described somewhere in the other part of the ordinance?
Well, I mean,
Yeah, so this is-
You know,
Well,
our properties, you know.
Right.
On Route 220, you know, 1,000 feet down the hill is the Mahomet River. Is that supposed to show on the plan?
so this is for people who are close to shoreline zones primarily, or vernal pools. So,
Which number are we on, 11?
12.
12.
well, yes.
All bodies of water.
12. I mean, I'm just,
Should I say all significant water bodies?
Applicable water bodies?
Applicable water bodies.
I mean, I understand if
For
it's,
location of all water bodies, including ponds, rivers, streams, and wetlands, in relation
In the
to
vicinity?
in the vicinity of the project
Yeah.
area,
well, I mean, but
Then
that's-
you have to define vicinity.
That could be impacted by the project.
that could be
Yeah.
impacted by the
Yeah.
project.
yeah, that, I mean, I think that's the point of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Why not say the point of it?
That could be impacted by a project.
The use of the property
Right.
or the
Yeah.
project.
Yep. Uh-oh, we're coming up to,
By the use of
Oh,
the
yeah.
proposal,
The Indian artifacts.
the project.
uh-oh.
Oh, geez.
do we have to
George,
adjourn or anything?
George is gonna go on a whole thing here. Location of any.
The warpath is what I'm gonna go on.
Location of any significant wildlife and plant habitats as identified on the most current beginning, though it should be capitalized, beginning with capitalized H habitat maps.
Can I just pause there just for a second?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's better than the next. We were selling materials to somebody who was trying to build a golf course on Cape Cod. The whole project was canceled because somebody couldn't prove that there were no owls there.
If there were no what?
Owls.
Oh, interesting.
Someone thought they saw an owl, and no one could prove that there wasn't an owl there.
So how do you prove a negative?
You can't. But I bring it up because this sort of opens up the door on, yeah, but I'm pretty sure I saw a red moose there one day.
Well, I have a beginning with habitat map that says otherwise.
Oh, okay, so you have, that's a reference that you have.
Right,
Okay.
that's the point of it. So if someone says, well, I support business and all that, but I'm just gonna keep using American Unagi.
Sure, go ahead.
But American Unagi can't build there because I saw the albino bat's cave right there. I'll pull out the most recent habitat beginning with habitats map and say, well, not only it's not in Waldoboro, it's nowhere in Maine.
Okay, so you have a response to,
Right.
okay, let's get to the next one then.
I mean, yeah, but that has the same, again, the proximity question.
Right.
That would be impacted, right?
Wait, the wildlife question?
The 12, 13, and 14,
Should I just say at the top, one or more site maps drawn to scale showing all the following features that could be impacted by the
Yes,
use?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good idea. Do you have any independent references that talk about where we should be checking for arrowheads?
1 second. The use of the project. Yes.
I was actually scalped, that's why I look this way.
So, 14, location of any archaeological or historic resources as identified on the maps and/or data contained in the current comprehensive plan.
Do we have that information on the?
There is a comprehensive plan. The second is that I would verify with the State of Maine's Historic Preservation Office. And then the third is that I actually have information from an individual in town who does have a record of of locations that he could find prehistoric artifacts or some arrowheads or things or similar things. So there was actually a case. This was the walkway. Remember back in May when we had like 5 applications in one night?
There was a walkway.
Yeah, someone wanted to build like a pier in the shoreline zone for their own personal use.
Oh, okay.
So with that one, that requires that I have to make sure there's no historic significance there.
Right, 'cause all the arrowheads in the shoreline, yep.
Yep. So I verified it with this individual who said, there's nothing in my records.
This individual being what kind of an individual?
Certified prehistoric.
Oh, okay, so it's
He
a-
used to work
yeah.
for the state, yeah, I know.
Oh, okay, so it's like a real, a
Right.
consultant, it's not just.
No, it was my
Somebody.
uncle actually.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Was it?
No.
I don't know, you might have an uncle like that.
No.
Well, that's too
can I ask
bad.
you a question on number 13? It
Yeah.
says, location of any significant wildlife and plant habitats as identified on the most current beginning with. Is there something extraneous there? Shouldn't it say as identified on the most current habitat maps?
Yeah,
It's called Beginning with Habitat.
Oh, that's the
That's
title.
the title. That's why I
Oh, then they
said,
should be capitalized.
that's what I, yeah.
Beginning with, should be capitalized, okay.
So, does that answer 14?
Yeah.
What about insects?
It would go into wildlife as well.
Okay. When insects are considered wildlife?
Any,
Depends on how big they are, doesn't it?
yeah.
Well, no, the little ones are
Oh, I
important.
know they are. Bees, for instance, yeah, they're in trouble.
Any significant wildlife or plants would be under these maps.
Are turkeys significant? I mean, they are to each other.
Well, in November.
but I meant the ones that are parading through my yard every morning.
Yeah, they're very
Hundreds of
You
them.
can't
significant.
eat those, though.
No, well,
Yes, you can.
No,
I,
but they're not so
my,
good, are they?
Oh, I've heard they're very.
are they, they're migrating?
Well, their feathers are protected under the inland fisheries and wildlife.
Their feathers are?
Yeah, you can't take them across state lines, you can't.
The
do a lot of-
feathers.
Yeah.
well, keep in mind, this is just saying, is such a thing on the property?
It's not judging whether that's okay or not, I guess.
Right. Again, with American Unagi, one of the things that was brought up, I think this was the DEP's process, was that there was location of the Atlantic salmon because you're dealing with the Madomic River at that point.
Okay,
But it's just what's the location of it in relation to the project.
yeah,
I mean, the Atlantic salmon are going to be in the Madomic River regardless.
yeah.
So the question is.
So it's back to impacted.
Right. So is what's being discharged from American Unagi going to kill the Atlantic salmon in the Madomic River?
So that would be a legitimate question.
Right.
That was answered, right, okay.
Right. And then 15, location of all streets,
Comma.
Yep, I see that. Streets, parking areas, comma, sidewalks, trails, and similar features.
Max, can I just ask you a quick question? This document called Beginning with Habitat Maps,
Yes,
where could I find a copy of that if I wanted to read it?
I can get copies after this meeting
Oh,
if you'd
all right.
like.
Is there any problem looming, because this basically is
We got 16.
pretty much right, an all-inclusive, I think it's all-inclusive of what's on a completed application.
Mm-hmm.
Is there ever gonna be a problem because one of them will change and the other one won't? This used to be a.
What do you
problem.
mean?
Well, supposing the planning board application added elm trees, or added something that isn't on this list, which one would be the,
You mean we added it, we requested it, we requested that it be added as we were reviewing the application? at the
no,
meeting?
the form changed. I'm just, anytime there's two places where there's a list that supposedly said, that sort of says the same thing, there's the danger that one will get
Change.
changed and the other won't.
Well, the form has to follow
This
the
is-
comprehensive plan and the
And
land
this.
use ordinance.
Okay, so this would be what would be changed, if ever.
Right.
And it would cause a change to their application.
Right.
Okay, that's it. I've been in situations where one changes and the other doesn't, and then you fight about which one's right,
Okay.
or other people fight.
So, number 16, road/driveway opening designs showing compliance with applicable state or town requirements. 17, location of all proposed signs. 18, location of all proposed landscaping, including required buffers. 19, location of all exterior lighting. 20, location of the 100-year floodplain. 21, location of any shoreland zoning boundaries. 22, location of any lands in resource protection, conservation easement, or areas where development is to be limited or prohibited. 23, man, my nose is really tickling tonight. 23, all easements.
All, not just some, but all.
All easements.
Go look at 4.
Location of right-of-ways and other easements. So 23.
So do you need 23?
So
23 could come off.
I think he's right.
or 4 could just take out and other easements. Either one.
Location of right-of-ways is one, and then easements is the last one.
Yeah. Does anyone have a preference of either getting rid of 23 or making 23 just the easement
I
one?
think 23, I haven't looked at where it is on the other one, but it makes sense to have them all
Yeah.
listed.
Number 4, location of rights of ways and other easements, and then 23 is all easements. So I can either scratch the easements out at 4, or I can scratch out number 23.
They're different. Easements are different than rights of way.
I think you should
Well,
have them
rights of way,
separate.
right
Location.
of way is a particular type of easement.
All right, so 4
Yeah.
is just going to be location of rights of ways.
Yeah.
All easements.
Is it a right?
It seems to make sense when you're listing all of this stuff that belongs there.
Okay.
So I'll keep
I mean,
that.
easements with, power lines,
Yeah.
Right.
whatever.
And the 100-year floodplain, that's still 100 years?
It happens every 3 years now.
But I mean, the document that we have to work with.
Oh, right, that's a good point.
Is still 100?
Right.
Okay, somehow I was thinking it was 50.
No, I look at the FEMA map to see what the 100-year floodplain is.
It is, you may have said it, but is the distance, one of the things that comes up in my world up there is the distance to a fire pond or to the firehouse.
I think that was said.
Fire pond.
Number 10, location of existing or proposed fire hydrants, fire ponds, or similar features.
So the distance to the fire department, which insurance companies care about quite a bit.
Could be a similar feature.
Well, this is talking about just your like, within the boundaries of your own property.
Right, right. That's a good point.
So I don't
Yeah,
think
that's
the
a-
fire
it's a di-
department
yeah.
would be on your property.
Yeah, no, well, no, but I mean, if, there's quite an insurance impact.
Right.
If you're further than a certain distance, or if you don't have a pond or a fire hydrant. But that's not part of the planning board process, that's part of
Right.
the insurance process.
Right, that would be separate.
Yep, okay.
Then we're moving on back to the 3.6s. Woo. 1.12. So just this is still under the submission requirements for all types of reviews. 1.12. Estimated demand for potable water and
Potable.
potable water and sewage disposal. 1.13. If
Wait,
public,
does that mean, if you're a long way from sewers, that just says you're gonna build a leach field, or?
for 1.12?
So if
Yeah.
you go to 1.14,
Yeah.
Okay, so it's one or the other, okay, I should have, yep.
So 1.13, if public sewer is to be used, evidence that the site can connect to the public system.
makes sense to me.
Yep,
1.14, if a subsurface wastewater disposal is to be used, a HHE 200 form showing that a new system can be installed at the site or evidence that the existing system can be used. 1.15, proposed vehicular and pedestrian traffic into and through the property. 1.16, any other information necessary to show compliance with the review criteria or other requirements of this ordinance. This would go into when we're talking about shoreland zoning, floodplain ordinance, wellhead protection for some people. So now we're on to 3.6.2, additional submission requirements for planning board review. 1, title block showing the owner's name, address, comma, name, comma, address, project title, comma,
In a small L.
lowercase l, location.
But this would be on the subdivision plan or whatever, right?
Right, but sometimes, like a hotel or a multi-unit family complex, it has to be a subdivision, but it also still has to show its, the site plan review. It's sort of an overlap.
Okay, got it.
2, names of engineer and, names of engineer and other professionals. 3, planning board approval block. 4, revision block.
and these are requirements for the submitted drawing.
Right, this is back to the boundary survey, I would say. The larger scale, or no. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you may want to cross-reference.
Yeah, it's a little unclear to me
Right.
why this just arrived here. This looks more like what would have to be on the plan submitted by Dorsey.
This applies to the site map?
wait. Where did the boundaries? Yeah, I'll check with Bill about that.
These are all parts of what the planning board form has. And I guess this is what, as you suggest, this is what determines what the planning board will require. This is the law that gives you the power to ask those questions, I
I
think.
mean,
is what
there's
we're
some
saying.
redundancy here from the preceding.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I do know with this one. So usually for the planning board's always expected to be the bigger one, the bigger projects, the construction ones. And this is supposed to have all the information on it so that if the application itself gets lost, all this is supposed to be on sort of that boundary survey so that you have the map, you have the names of the planning board members, you have contour lines, you have all the items that are listed here. I think that's what it is, but I'll double check with Bill. I don't wanna,
Should this title have something about boundary? My mind just went blank, the term you used,
the boundary lines,
boundary survey.
the title block is primarily for, the applicant, or at least,
I think what I meant was additional submission requirements or planning board review. Should there be something after that?
for boundary survey.
Yeah. To differentiate it from the rest of the information that's
Again,
requested that sounds a little redundant.
This,
Yeah,
the
I'll-
other- the other is, even if it isn't the planning board though, I think. Or is it?
what do you mean?
On the submission requirements, all types of reviews,
Right, and then 3.6.2 is just for the planning board.
But there isn't anything that's just for the planning board. Everything,
is there?
Well, there's
for
some,
every-
there's some projects that would require the planning board to approve.
but they all do. So.
They all require
this-
some type of approval, but specifically for the planning board, because we're imagining the planning board will
This
only.
is all stuff the planning board needs to sign, the title block and the name.
Right.
And see that information.
You wouldn't need this on a site plan for a single-family dwelling on
Right.
an existing
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out how the title of this section needs to be changed to relate to the,
Apply to, yeah.
Well,
the 12 points and then differentiate itself from the rest of them, so it doesn't sound like you're saying something twice.
I think with 3.6.1 being submission requirements for all types of reviews, 3.6.2 is additional submission requirements for planning board review.
Yeah.
So I could say solely for planning board review.
How does an applicant know whether they fall into this category or this category?
That,
Well, 3.6.1 is for all of them,
Okay,
but then 3.6.2
Is it-
is just adding on to it.
for whom?
For anyone who in the new matrix would
chart
be for,
thing, right?
yeah,
You
in the
know,
chart.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
Chart tells you who you have to go to.
in most cases, people are gonna know whether or not they're gonna have to go to the planning board.
Yeah, it's usually pretty,
Are there any?
And they all get this, don't they? You know, when they come to you?
right.
So they're gonna know, the formula now is very clear. Yeah, okay, so this relates to this.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. So, yeah, you're gonna tell me.
So,
Is
okay.
that all we should do?
You're running overtime.
You're doing both. No, it just means I can take time off of work more. So I'll just quickly go through the 12. So 1, title block showing the owner's name, address, project title, location. 2, names of engineer and other professionals. 3, planning board approval block. 4, revision block. 5, block to list any conditions imposed by the planning board. 6, building and structure drawings showing the footprint, height, front, side, and rear profiles and all design features necessary to show compliance with this ordinance. Parentheses, structure plans to meet the requirements of the building code are not required for planning board review, but will be necessary to obtain a building/construction permit. End parentheses. 7, an estimate of the peak hour and average daily traffic to be generated by the project and evidence that additional traffic can be safely handled on the adjacent streets. 8, a site map prepared and sealed by a professional engineer or architect. 9, a stormwater and erosion control plan. 10, indicate the technical and financial capacity of the applicant to undertake and complete the proposed activity. 11, proposed contour lines at intervals no more than 10 feet 12, fire protection provisions as per ordinance requirements.
Do you know what?
You don't have the little numbers, I mean, period after the numbers on that. It's, makes it a little bit harder.
Right.
Doesn't add so much.
The ordinance has fire protection provisions?
Campgrounds, for example, ask that the fire chief approve how they handle campfires or things of that
So
nature.
if someone builds building, isn't necessarily,
Right,
There
I
are
mean, you,
structural things for, you know, the-
yeah, sprinkler systems and
Yeah.
you
There'd be
get the
building
state,
code requirements.
yeah,
Yeah.
and getting the state fire marshal to approve it as
and
well.
because our population is more than 5,000, we have a higher standard we have to meet,
Right, MUPEC,
yes,
yes.
which required me putting a firewall in, quite expensive.
I did not approve MUPEC, I did not do anything related to MUPEC.
I shouldn't be facing the camera.
3.7, review criteria. 3.7.1, review criteria for all types of review. Last page. The applicant shall demonstrate that the proposed use or activity meets the review criteria listed below. The CEO, town planner, or planning board shall approve an application unless they find that one or more of the following criteria has not been met. Like last time, I'm just gonna go 1 point whatever. 1.1, the application is complete and the review fee has been paid. 1.2, the proposed activity conforms to all applicable provisions of this ordinance. 1.3, the proposed activity will not result in water pollution, erosion, or sedimentation to water bodies. 1.4, the proposal will provide for the adequate disposal of all wastewater and solid waste. 1.5, the proposal will not have an adverse impact upon a wildlife habitat, unique natural areas, and archaeological and historic resources. So this goes back to your fear of finding an owl or an arrowhead. The proposal will not have an adverse of 1.6. The proposal will not have an adverse impact upon water bodies and wetlands. 1.7. The proposal will provide for adequate stormwater management. 1.8. The proposal will conform to all applicable shoreland zoning requirements. 1.9. The proposal will conform to all applicable floodplain management requirements. 1.10. The proposal will have sufficient water available to meet the demands of the development. The proposal will not adversely impact groundwater quality or quantity. 1.11. The proposal will provide for safe and adequate vehicle and pedestrian access and circulation into the development.
Back on 1-10, what is necessary to establish that you're not impacting groundwater quantity?
The proposal will not adversely impact groundwater quality and quantity.
Yeah, quantity is the tricky one.
So, let's American Unagi again. They have a huge demand for the water they have to take. So, it was determined they could meet that demand with their source, the wellhead. And what they're going to do isn't going to be dumping the water right there or dumping any waste that will infect the pump or
Right.
whatever.
There's no quality issues.
Right. So let's say someone else wanted to build on the same lot and use the same exact source, and they have the same exact demand, but it's found that it won't meet that same demand. Well, if the planning board says, well, it's not going to meet the same demand, we can't approve it that way.
Because someone's already using that water.
Right.
Okay.
So either the person so either American Yagi needs to bring down their demand, or the other has to bring down their demand.
I wanted to see what you'd say. What they did do is they did a pump test and monitored wells, not even on the property, to see if it had any impact on adjacent property wells, so that they would know for their own purposes. It's a very, very tricky, and they didn't. It is a tricky question if someone's well goes dry half a mile away.
Yeah.
It's, And again, that's why they did the test. They didn't want to have any entanglements like that. But, and my reason for dwelling on it at 20 minutes of 8 is, so you aren't requiring other properties to be, they did that because they wanted to do that, not because you required them to. To look at wells half a mile away.
Right, that would be more for them, because if they have a certain demand and they're saying this is gonna be our source, the planning board says, well, that source should be good, then that should be it. But if they say, well, that's gonna be our source, but the planning board says, well, that source couldn't possibly be sufficient for it all, then that's that.
Well, or drawing it down as much as you're probably going to is going to affect groundwater in the whole area, which it didn't. But I mean, that's what the question is they wanted to have an answer for.
I mean, I think that's a relevant question.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely. I'm not pushing back against it. I was just wondering if the town meant to extend this beyond the property itself. That's really the core question. Oh, no, it's absolutely reasonable.
So I think what you're getting at here is that the proposal not adversely impact groundwater quality or quantity in proximity to the location.
Yes, there probably would be
In
something.
proximity of the project. The proposal will not adversely impact groundwater quality or quantity in proximity of the project location.
Or you might even just say abutting properties.
Well, because it could affect the properties that aren't exactly
Yeah.
abutting.
Right.
So forget abutting. But then you do get into the, well, what caused what, you know, it gets to be very tricky if you don't put some kind of bounds on it. If somebody's
I don't-
well goes dry a mile and a half away,
But I don't see how you can really predict that
You probably
exactly.
can't, because there could be other things, you know,
yeah,
it's over here, and
yeah.
there's other wells.
And they're
that are
filling their
over
swimming
there.
pool and, yeah,
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
but the only reason I brought it up is because, well, because you did. The quality and quantity of groundwater, if someone says, well, what does that mean? We should collectively have some kind of a,
Relative to the water table, is it directly, do those two things affect it directly?
well, I don't know what the answer is. I know that depending on what you're drawing, sometimes it has an effect on adjacent wells. So then you get into, what do we mean by adjacent, and how do we know what caused what? When you have, you know, there could be 15 wells within 1,000 feet conceivably of a primary well.
Well, that's what I'm saying, when it says the proposal will have a sufficient water available to meet the demands of the development. So they need to say where their water is coming from.
Okay, well, no, that, maybe you just answered the question. If it says it must be sufficient, the presumption is that sufficient means you aren't drying up anybody else's wells.
Right.
Okay,
So if a hotel's, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so now that you've mentioned the word sufficient, then that makes it, then that applies to all projects without any more details, really.
So does that take out the questions you had earlier? Do we need to include the bit at
Adjacent,
the end
anybody?
in proximity of the project location?
No, I don't think you do, because you'd never be able to decide what was, you know, which ones were which.
Okay. So okay with that. And then 3.11, proposal will provide for safe and adequate vehicle and pedestrian access and circulation into the development. 3.7.2, additional review criteria. The following review criteria shall be applicable only to planning board review. Okay. The applicant has the adequate financial and technical capacity to meet the provisions of this ordinance.
We just read that a few minutes ago.
Yeah, I know, that's why I'm going back and forth here.
Yeah, that was,
That's right up above there someplace.
Yeah.
3.6.2.10. Well, that's a determine, you know, the application has to submit evidence of that, and then
And then
review, you know.
This is the planning board saying it.
validates
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It's similar to when we were talking about earlier, when is an application complete and when is an application accepted by the municipal authority. So, the following review criteria shall be applicable only to planning board review. The applicant has the adequate financial and technical capacity to meet the provisions of this ordinance.
I take the word "the" adequate before adequate out.
Okay. Has adequate financial capacity
Yeah. And technical capacity.
and technical capacity to meet. The proposal shall be designed and located on the site so as to minimize any adverse impacts on neighboring properties.
Whatever that means.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
that's tough. I
That
mean,
bring,
So,
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
That brings up the giant light beam issue, Sarah's favorite topic.
Mm.
Because somebody can put, one of those big lights on their property and it can go beyond several properties onto somebody else's house.
It doesn't say to eliminate, it just says to minimize.
Yeah, but
Well,
how
so.
do you
I mean,
quantify that?
So, I mean, this recognizes that, there might be some adverse impact. But basically, I think what that means is that every major effort has to be taken to minimize that impact.
Well, and this would go back to when the planning board has their public hearing and notices are sent to abutting property owners. If a property owner comes in and says, well, what they're proposing is going to ruin my view of the river, for example, this is an item the planning board would look at and say, well, this is going to have an impact on the neighboring property owner. Is there a way we can minimize it so they can still see the river?
And then you get into, and still be able to turn the truck around.
Yes.
No, I mean, we
No,
face
no,
that.
that's-
Yeah, it'll be a balance that somebody will accept, that to be safe and practical, you might be closer to the hedge than your
Would like
neighbor
to.
would like to be.
Yeah.
So I guess as long as, one of the things when I was on this committee like this about 10 years ago was the basic question, how much do you rely on the people on the planning board to
Do the right
to
thing.
accept the responsibility of making decisions versus getting completely hogtied trying to understand the language, the details of the language, and they aren't always
Accurate.
there's always a tension there. The very last paragraph, is there supposed to be a word after maximum extent?
I'll get to that
Sorry.
in a minute. Does anyone else have any comments for that third paragraph or sentence?
Yeah, minimize means do the best you can, I think,
Pretty much.
yeah.
So the last paragraph, proposal will reflect the proposal will reflect the natural capabilities of the site to support the development. Structures and other features are located in areas of the site most suitable for the proposed activity. Environmentally sensitive areas including water bodies, steep slopes, floodplains, wetlands, significant plant and wildlife habitats, aquifers, and archaeological and historic resources shall be preserved to the maximum extent.
I'm not sure if that should say possible or practical, or should be preserved where possible. I don't know, that sounds like an absolute, but I don't, it's sort of like minimize. I don't know how you,
Well, I mean, it recognizes that that there might be some impact, but you have to, I mean, you're right.
Minimize.
Maximize, minimize,
Yeah.
you know.
I was wondering if you meant to say to the maximum extent possible or practical.
Bill wrote this.
You suppose Bill would like possible or practical?
I think adding in maximum extent practical or possible would still fit with what he had in mind.
Then I would like to see.
Except that that's a relative term.
Right, yeah, what do you think is practical?
Yeah.
Practical, the guy can say, oh, it's gonna cost me too much.
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
Right,
each
you
of
know.
us
but,
could have a different
and,
reason
I
for
mean,
what
to think
practical.
about, impact, I mean, on one hand, you have 0% impact, and the other hand, you have 100% impact, which wipes it out. So if you're really talking about maximizing, only ends up with 10%?
I'm just, I don't know the answer, honestly, but the idea, well, to the maximum extent, it just seemed like there was a word missing.
But these.
I think the intention similar to what the last sentence was where we want to minimize any adverse impacts to the neighboring properties. Similar to this one, if it's an inevitable, if someone is doing the project and it's going to go into, let's say, a floodplain zone, if they have a little corner of their building going into it, it's going to affect the area, but it's not like they're going to change the entire landscape or environment of it. It's just going to be that little corner there.
So,
It's the same balancing act the planning board will have to decide. You know, is destroying half of this ancient Indian burial ground the maximum extent?
Well, that's my point.
Yeah.
I think if you say the maximum extent, you're setting up a strict rule, which probably should be
Which
a strict
preserves
rule.
important things. I mean,
Exactly.
this is all this
Because
thing kind of.
with everything
You
that's
know,
going on with the climate and
At some
everything,
point.
somebody's got to step up
At
to
some
the
point in
bat.
this
Yeah.
continuum, there's got to be a place where the planning board says, no, you can't do it.
Right,
Yeah,
because these
Yeah.
things need to be protected.
Right.
yeah,
That's, I don't know. I like the way it reads.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's very clear this way. In other words, there's no, you cannot say, well, I don't think it's practical because
Right.
it's gonna cost more. You've eliminated the excuses.
Right.
I just had a question, Max. Do you want to number these? I just noticed.
I was about to say,
where you
this
had listed-
probably should be numbered.
Because last time we did a little colon, we had numbers.
3.7.2.1, the applicant has the adequate financial and technical capacity.
You took out the
The applicant has
adequate.
financial and
right.
technical capacity. That's where the 2.1 would start, is
Okay, yeah.
3.7.2.2 and then 3.7.2.3. All right,
Cool.
and that is Article 3. Now on to Article
Did it.
4.
We did it.
what time is the meeting end?
It ended
could've-
basically 20 minutes ago.
Okay.
When did we start? We started at 20 ago.
If the group's feeling on this last paragraph that I was just asking about is that it's an absolute, then it should say that.
To the absolute maximum extent.
To the absolute maximum.
I don't, it seems like it leaves no area for the judgment of the board. I'm still hung up on that.
Shall be preserved to the absolute maximum.
I meant that not sincerely. I mean, because the rest of the language suggests that it's got to be a suitable place. But then it goes in, if it does go into absolutes, then I'm not sure how you do that, or if I'm
Well, I
ever
mean-
going to apply.
I mean, what the planning board could, applying these criteria could say, well, your proposal is to build 47 units, but we're only going to allow you to build 24. At which point the developer would say, that's not economically feasible.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and
I
again,
think that kind of protects the board members, really, to say maximum extent.
yeah.
It protects them to give their,
Be able to
they
say
know,
no.
they know that they can say no.
Right.
Without having to justify anything.
Yeah.
Well, they
Which
don't
is-
have to
in this
justify
climate
what
is
they're
good.
doing, but when challenged.
It's
Well-
okay, I'm old.
Well, and again,
Me too.
going with American Unagi,
You like that?
I
Well, they
do
did a really
love-
good job with their application. It was
Yeah.
quite remarkable.
Yeah.
Yes. Environmentally sensitive areas, including water bodies, so we'll use the Madomic River, and they're discharging into the Madomic River. What they did wasn't really harming the river at all. It was cleaner water than they initially got, and it wasn't going to change how that river was going to.
Well, I think, in fact, not agreeing with you, but I think the way they actually made that determination was based on the water quality in the river historically, you couldn't do anything that made it worse,
Right.
which to a degree is not an absolute.
Right.
It's in the context of this whole situation, this is not a problem or this is a problem. And the rules were that as long as the water you're putting back in is not decreasing the quality of the river,
Right.
then it was okay.
Right, they're impacting it, but they're not, it's the same.
It's a
or-
reasonable impact.
Right,
And I guess I'm hoping that that last paragraph allows for that kind of reasonable evaluation.
I'm gonna mark it
But-
as a thing that we will come back to when we go through this again,
Okay.
just because,
And the applicant could also make suggestions for how they might mitigate something that they might be causing.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody knows that I'm pro-environment. I mean, this is now more of a language thing and trying to have your meetings flow smoothly and everyone leaving understanding what happened and it was okay.
Well, because it was preserved to maximum extent because no harm is being done, right? Even though there's change.
unless you're gonna tell us something right now.
No, but what you just said is an interesting thing because to the maximum extent would be no impact.
Well, I guess then you have to define impact, because if nothing bad's happening,
Well, and then I go back to what I said with the floodplain, that one little corner of the building, like, rather than having the whole building in the floodplain, and it's just moved up, but there's only gonna be a tiny little bit in there, they can't really do too much, and is that one corner gonna change the entire,
Would be the base.
Environment
To their
or
insurance
ecosystem.
company.
Yeah, yeah, right.
to their insurance company, but not to the wetland, not to any of the resources listed in this paragraph?
Unless it was interpreted that any impact is a disqualifier.
Yeah.
You also don't know what's gonna happen in the future, because things change, and that's
Well,
not
floodplains are
so
gonna
much
move.
in Maine, but in a lot of other places.
I think
All of a
lot
sudden,
of-
something crumbles, or something is flooded that has never been flooded before.
Yeah.
And, and we're seeing it happen. And so this state is fairly stable because it's built on rock, but some of them aren't,
Yeah. Oh, no, I mean, when I
So,
watch the storms coming up out of the
Except
Gulf.
Rockland Harbor,
yeah.
the whole section of Rockland Harbor just slid into
Slid
the
it was
harbor
about 20 years ago. Yeah.
Down by the hospital, Mount Nias Hospital,
Uh,
where they have the ponds,
Yeah.
all the driveways, and all the sides are crumbling into the, and
So,
it's only about that wide, so you can't have two cars
Yeah.
at once, it's strange. I'm
so,
going home.
I was just gonna say what date the next meeting is.
Oh, what day? Date?
Date.
I don't have my calendar with me.
Date, no, date is another thing we can do later. The next land
Was
use,
it something we should know?
no, the next land use committee meeting is March 9th. March
March 9th.
9th
at 5:30.
at 5:30 PM.
Yeah, April should be when we go back, I would think, because when does daylight,
Daylight
It's that
savings
day.
actually ends
Caucus
March
Day,
8th,
Oh,
You're kidding.
What day of the week is March 9th?
Monday,
a Monday,
but daylight.
like today.
Yeah.
I don't think a month
Wise,
away from now, no, but it'll still be dark when we're done. By the
But
time
day-
April
but
rolls
we
around.
can-
March 8th is the day we change our calendar, our
Mar-
clock.
Yeah,
Yep.
you can change your calendar if you want to.
Well, March 9th, we can discuss changing the time back if we want, or not. We'll meet on the
But that's
9th.
the next one, so
Right, that's the next one. It's right after daylight
I
savings.
think we should still keep it.
At 5:30.
That's what
Oh
he said.
geez, yeah, you're right though, but I don't think that it's gonna be
We will-
light by,
I think we'll meet at 5:30 still.
that's good, because then I'm gonna get home at 7:30, I can have time for a cocktail.
Well, supposedly at 7:30. Yes.
Yeah, see? Wolfgang's probably pacing the floor right now.
I
mean
think
you
the
won't break
9th
the law?
works for me, but you want to remind me several
Yes.
times that day.
I will send out the usual reminder. So, does anyone?
I did the Johnny Walker.
All right. So if no one has any other problems, I'm going to turn off the recording and I'm going to go home.
It's about time.